Hey everybody, this is Carl back again for another comic book spoiler review. Continuing on with the X-Men solo stories, and nearly done with the solo stories. Now today I'm covering the 13th issue run, pun intended, of Quicksilver. It was like only two stories. One is kind of like a tie into some kind of like Avengers event called No Surrender. So like, I mean, one day I'll cover that, but I want to stick with something that's specifically tied to Quicksilver. All the other stuff is him like in like team ups. Uh, I'm wearing a freaking Flash shirt. This is a different speedster. But Quicksilver, yeah. After this, the final solo story I'll be covering will be his sister, Wanda, the Scarlet Witch. So look forward to that in the next week and some change. But yeah. This is written by Tom Peyer, art by Casey Jones, yes, I know, and Rob Hines. And before we continue, please like and subscribe, hit the notification bell, share this with your friends at youtube.com/talkativecarl. Follow me on links in the description below, like my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/talkativecarl. Check out my Patreon if you want to become a Patreon member at the $1 tier to suggest certain reviews that you want me to cover. It's patreon.com/talkativecarl. You can follow me on my Twitter channel, twitter.com/talkativecarl or at talkativecarl. Yeah. It took a bit of time because I have so much other stuff to cover. My recent reviews and posts have been blowing up, so I want to take a moment to thank you all so much. Especially my last chaotic lore video. It just like jumped immediately. It's like, wow, you guys are amazing with my lore video about Christella. If you watched the TV show Chaotic, you know who I'm talking about. If you haven't seen the TV show Chaotic, you can watch the majority of the show on youtube.com. So I don't know why I added the .com, but yeah, you can check that out. And then check out my lore videos as I do certain deep dives on certain characters, battle gear, locations, etc. Anyway, yeah, Quicksilver, and of course we know he got super speed, but we'll just it should be pretty quick. We know how his familiar with his powers, whether it's either Evan Peters or what's his name, who's gonna be Kraven the Hunter now. Speed physiology. Pietro's body is adapted towards the rigors of high-speed running. His cardiovascular and respiratory system are many times more efficient than those of a normal human being. He metabolizes an estimated 95% of the caloric energy content of foodstuffs. Normal humans use about 25%. The chemical process of Quicksilver's musculature are so highly advanced that his body does not generate fatigue poisons, the normal byproducts of locomotion, which force the body to rest. Rather, his body constantly expels waste products during his accelerated respiration through exhalation. His joints are smoother and lubricated more efficiently than those of a normal human being. His tendons have the tensile strength of spring steel. His bones contain unknown materials sufficiently more durable than calcium to withstand the dynamic shocks of his feet touching the ground at speeds a human could never achieve or withstand. Quicksilver's like most, is most vicious than normal, thus preventing rapid evaporation and replenishment of surface fluids on his eyeballs under the influence of high wind velocity to occlude his vision. Superhuman speed. He was originally capable of running at speeds of 175 miles per hour. He had sufficient energy reserves that enabled him to run at this average speed for roughly 4 hours before reducing his speed to replenish his body store of energy. Quicksilver has used his powers of acceleration for various feats, such as when he plucked an arrow out of the air from a standing start, dodged machine gun fire, and has created cyclone-like gusts of wind, which are able to knock a man off his feet. He is able to run across the Atlantic Ocean to oversee continents without having to stop, run up sides of buildings effortlessly, and even fly for short distances by using rapid air currents produced by his legs for thrust. After his powers were upgraded by Isotope E, which we'll cover in this story, his running speed was increased until he was capable of easily reaching high supersonic speeds between Mach 4, or 3,080 miles per hour, and Mach 5, 3,691 miles per hour. The true extent of his amplified abilities are unknown and are stated to be limitless. He has been observed outrunning Thor's lightning bolts, running from Tibet to Indonesia in a few seconds, or covering half the Earth's distance in 92 seconds. Quicksilver is also resistant to the effects of friction, reduce oxygen up to a point where a human can no longer breathe, and impact upon his body while moving at super speeds. He has traveled around the world by running on top of the ocean water, and even ran all the way up Mount Everest without slowing down, and went flying above a cloud level as a result. He has recently shown the ability to shift his molecules through solid objects and transport people at speeds greater than the speed of sound without injuring them. So pretty much like phasing through walls and stuff like that. Superhuman durability. Pietro's bones is super durable and capable of resisting tremendous impact forces that can easily crush and kill a human without suffering any serious external or internal injuries. Superhuman reflexes. So pretty much can dodge a lot of stuff with his super speed, like it's insane degrees. Accelerated metabolism. Pietro's metabolism is more than 15 times that of a normal human being, thus enabling him to heal much faster than normal and have an extended health and longevity. Superhuman stamina, agility, strength, quick intelligence. He can process information at superhuman speeds, enabling him to read dozens of books in a matter of minutes, or teach himself to play a musical instrument in a matter of moments. Navigation. Quicksilver can sense vibrational patterns in his environment that enable him to always find magnetic north. This allows him to navigate and change course instinctively despite blurring at high speeds or lack of landmarks, like over open ocean. Tongue twister. Molecular acceleration destabilization. Through the course of his life as a mutant, his super speed has granted him numerous abilities. One of very peculiar ones was being able to vibrate his molecular structure at high speeds. Different writers used it for different purposes that were often absurd or completely ignored it to avoid obscurity. He has demonstrated the full effect, which enables him to destabilize atomic matter by accelerating the target object's molecular structure, often causing it to fall apart or explode, usually by touching it. It is unknown if he can do this from a distance like his nephew Thomas Shepard. He also has the ability to fly for short periods of time. Intangibility. Pietro also can use molecular destabilization to walk through solid objects. X-bolt deflection. He has been shown to be able to deflect his sister's probability manipulation bolts. So it's kind of like, if you're related to each other, if you're both mutants, neither one of your powers will affect the other. Very typical in the X-Men canon. Multilingual, speaks English, fluent in Russian, and Romani. Skilled combatant, was trained by Captain America. He's a skilled musician. He can play like the organ, more than likely the piano as well, just in general. Weaknesses: mental illness. Pietro has undergone mental breakdowns, episodes of mental illness, and severe depression. According to his sister, Pietro is a textbook sociopath, which causes him to ruin his relationships through manipulation and force. Yeah. So that's pretty much the bulk of Quicksilver. Okay. Quicksilver. This now I want to warn you guys, because it's like partway through me going through this 13-issue run, I come to understand like there's certain periods, like little mini arcs through this run, where like after the first 2 to 4 issues, then it tends to like in the last page is like continue in Quicksilver team up Heroes for Hire, or continue in Avengers blah blah blah, or continue in Iron Man blah blah blah. It there's gonna be some stuff that probably left unfinished in a way, or we don't see like the result of a certain thing at least a couple of times. Doesn't necessarily take me out of it, but that's probably the biggest glaring problem I have. I think that was kind of it was a part bigger thing back in like the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. Less so. I'm not saying it never happens anymore, but it's less so now, where it's like you gotta, unless it's like maybe like an event where you gotta go. But I feel like it's like I'm not sure. I didn't read tons of comics as a little kid. I read my fair share of whatever I can get my hands on, but it just feels like you gotta pick up a Spider-Man story if you want to pick up what happened with Captain America. If you read a Captain America story and something he's dealing with, you gotta if it's like a 20-issue thing, and like by issue 5 you want to know what happened, his little tangle with I don't know, like Taskmaster, you gotta pick up where it like pick up a next issue of Spider-Man where it picks up there. And you want to know what happened, you gotta read that, because next time you get back into Captain America, the whole situation resolved, and he's like dealing with some other stuff with Shield all of a sudden. And it's like them's the breaks when you're trying to read comics like that. But anyway, this Pietro's story picks up not too long after the events of Onslaught, which is once we get into the X-Men team stuff. That's one of the X-Men events that I will be covering in a few weeks. But long story short, this is kind of a slight spoiler, but there's a spoiler for a comic event that is like nearly like 20 so years old. Matter of fact, I don't even know when like the Onslaught event occurred, but it's definitely like in the early 2000s, very early 2000s, when that event was transpiring. So most of the like it was during the time when like Marvel uh comics was like really like, you know, having financial troubles, and certain people were getting fired left and right. People had to come and wrap up certain things, and there's around the time when they, gave certain studios the rights to certain characters at the time, just to, you know, gain some kind of revenue. Like Hulk went to Universal, uh so then Namor, you know, Fox got X-Men and Fantastic Four, Sony got Spider-Man stuff at that time, just to like, you know, you know, because essentially I think they was filing for bankruptcy or something like that, Chapter 13 or something like that. That's why it took so long for Marvel to gain the rights back to all the characters that they had after, like, you know, things really picking up with the MCU. And I think as of right now, the Hulk stuff, you know, I think like, you know, Universal and Marvel finally, like, you know, gotten some kind of agreement with the Hulk. Not too dissimilar to what we got with Spider-Man and Sony, but I don't know, like, in the thoroughness of the deal that they had, but I think they're in better shape now than they were during the first 10 years of MCU, where they could not make a solo Hulk movie, at least not after like the Edward Norton situation. Anyway, so one of the biggest like things that I kind of like, I had a gripe with as I was reading through this, and didn't kind of like made it, I didn't feel better until like halfway through reading this, where they kind of do like a flashback kind of thing, where they kind of make the beginning of this story make a lot more sense, because it feels like, I don't know, it feels like, okay, like, I don't want to use the words like you just thrown into a story with no context, because most comics are like that, but it's just there's at least a level of foundation, or at least, you know, you get some kind of level of footing. Think of it the same way as like WandaVision, where like the first 2 episodes, you know, people was not get into it, like, okay, like, you know, it's kind of like that. And it wasn't until the 3rd episode when things start like, okay, now we're like, you know, got the ball rolling. So it's kind of like that. Anyway, Pietro is running to Wundagore Mountain. Now, if you're not familiar with Pietro's origins, yeah, you know, like in the early years of Quicksilver and Wanda's upbringing, it gets kind of confusing, and they, you know, the history gets very wonky here and there. But just to make things clear, because they play fast and loose with who their parents are, but, you know, just make it clear, Pietro and Wanda are Magneto's kids, done and done. You know, as I went through with the Magneto solo story, Magneto, after the whole concentration camp, made hooked up with a Romani woman named Magna. They birth children, Polaris being technically their first child, being the oldest. And, you know, I don't know how they got separated, but then he had twins, Pietro and Wanda. But the mother, you know, I guess fell out of love with Magneto. I guess after finding out about his powers at that time, wasn't very understanding, or at least he did something that was, you know, kind of horrific with his powers, that was frightening her. Went, you know, to Wundagore Mountain, where she met this kind of cow lady named Bova. And of course, at that time, it was like, I mean, unless you was like a very avid, like, you know, comic reader, you was in the know, but I was not in the know, because I seen this cow lady, you know, as a kid pop up here and there, random. I wasn't really paying attention, but now that I'm older, yeah, she is. If you watch Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, the main villain is the High Evolutionary, who in normal circumstances is drawn to be a white guy. Even though in the movie he's played by a black guy. But the High Evolutionary is an evil dude. In this little adventure, he's kind of like played like he's like, not as bad as it seemed, but no, he is a bad guy. Just in this case, in this little thing here, it's like less evil, or at least still got that kind of like godlike mindset, like whatever. He created these, humanoid animal hybrids, his new men, and Bova being one of the first, at least the first wave. And Bova found, Magna in his dead of winter, runs to Bova's cabin when she's like pregnant, about to pop, and like needs help. Didn't really think twice about this cow lady for some reason. But I guess it wasn't really topical of her mind, given the fact that she was literally about to give birth. So Bova, doing like a midwife thing, helped birth Pietro and Wanda. And realizing this kindly cow lady, how well she treated her, her children, figured like, I don't know the story. I don't know if she was like, worried that Magneto was going to track her down somehow or whatever. She kind of left her children in the care of Bova, ran out the next day unbeknownst to Bova, and probably died in the woods or something like that from the elements or whatever. But Wanda and Pietro was raised by Bova and viewed her as like a mother. Well, in some iterations, she was, they was raised for a little bit. Then Bova gave, but in this case, they were still babies. But somehow they still, got in contact with her. I don't know. There's a flashback, revisiting this here, and it shows that they're still babies. So unless the Romani people that Bova handed the babies off to told Pietro and Wanda when they got a little older about Bova, maybe that's why. But at any rate, Bova, at a certain point knew that like these babies need to be cared for by other human beings. So she happened upon this kindly Romani people, found this couple, handed these babies off to them. And then when they got a little older, discovered that mutant powers, they was cast out, especially because of Wanda being viewed as some type of witch. So they was cast out. Then eventually they found their father, Magneto, became part of the Brotherhood of Mutants for a while. Then eventually joined the Avengers, and the rest is history. And then of course they had their run-ins with the X-Men and all the other stuff. But the rest is history. So Pietro's running back to Wonder Mountain because he had a daughter named Luna. He had with the Inhuman named Crystal. If you don't know who Crystal is, she's part of the Inhuman royal family who has the ability to control the elements like fire, ice, water, fire, water, earth, and wind. And of course, there's, I want to say animosity, but there is like a decent relationship between mutants, or at least the X-Men and the Inhuman family, the royal family. But in most other cases, Inhumans and other mutants, there's usually some static here and there, depending on the writer. But Crystal in the earliest, when the first time I saw Crystal, as a matter of fact, the Fantastic Four had introduced a lot of characters that we come to love to this day. They were the first one that met up with the Inhumans. Matter of fact, Medusa, for a little while, this is before we even knew, I think she kind of got retconned in like the 90s, possibly early 2000s, to be an Inhuman, because for the earliest years, I remember Medusa being an enemy to the, like just like a bad guy, bank robber type of, bad person for the Fantastic Four. They run in from time to time, or even other street level characters. But then, because her ability to control her hair, to use like kind of like Sindel from Mortal Kombat, just to use it like a weapon, like almost strong as steel sometimes. And she's married to the leader Black Bolt, and she actually can. I'm pretty sure she has some kind of low level, psychic abilities, just to be able to read Black Bolt's mind, so she can communicate for him, because he cannot speak. Otherwise, just by a whisper, he can just annihilate a mountain. So, like, is one of the most powerful characters in Marvel Comics. Then you got Karnak, who has the ability to like find the weak points in anything he sees, and use kind of martial arts skills to kind of like, use kind of pressure point kind of skills to like annihilate anything that he takes down through via pressure points. And then you of course got Lockjaw, the Inhuman dog, who can teleport. Anyway, Crystal, the Fantastic Four met with the Inhumans. Man was the first one to introduce the Black Panther, or it was I was about to say no, it probably was the Avengers. No, it was the Fantastic Four that introduced us to the world of Black Panther and Wakanda. Namor. There's like a lot of things we owe the Fantastic Four for establishing certain characters that we love today. But Crystal was the first person that we, a lot of fans can recall being in like, the Human Torch guy in a serious relationship with. But that fell through. Then she had like a relationship with like the Black Knight, Dane Whitman, if you remember from the Eternals. She had like a on again, off again relationship. And then like she got with Pietro, and they have like a solid relationship, and they have a kid and stuff like that. But as I was reading this, and it might sound mean, but after I was done with the entire thing, I was like, okay. At first, my first instinct was like, man, she's for the streets. But then I started thinking like, no. Well, yes and no. The reason I say no, because technically these three guys were, each one were serious. Well, two were serious relationships. Black Knight was more or less a fling, because she was like, on the outs with Quicksilver, and she just, needed. I'll address it in this, the story, but I don't know. Always liked Crystal and Johnny Storm together. It's kind of a shame that never stuck or sticked. But anyway, it's fine with Quicksilver. It's fine. But anyway, he's running to Wundagore Mountain. He's doing a whole captain's log thing in his earpiece, leaving some recordings to himself. And then he's reaching out as he's getting close to Wundagore. He's reaching out to Bova, let her know that he's on his way to see his daughter. He left her in Boba's care while he was trying to sort things out after the whole situation with the whole onslaught fallout, and so many of his super friends, was lost in that fight, and most of the X-Men, most of the Avengers, including Crystal, in that fight. So Wundagore is under attack by Exodus and his acolytes. Now, if you're not familiar with that, if you watch my spoiler review of the 90s X-Men TV show, there's a couple of seasons where we're introduced to Magneto's acolytes, and Magneto was making this like kind of asteroid M situation, and one of his little followers was Fabian Cortez, who we know to be like a radical zealot, taking what Magneto's dreams and taking it way too far. He's working under Exodus, who is also just a zealot, and at this point in time Magneto start dead, so they kind of Exodus kind of took up the mantle of Magneto's dream, and they are attacking the High Evolutionary and his people because they view what High Evolutionary is doing as an abomination to mutant kind of forcing mutations and messing around with evolution. And Quicksilver is running there, and he's a bunch of these new men are just taking out most of these acolytes, and Pietro's is only focused on trying to find his daughter. And of course, the main goal, why they're really taking siege of this place, is because the High Evolutionary has this isotope E, which helps with this artificial mutation, which they want to steal and destroy the High Evolutionary and all these new men in the process. But of course, the High Evolutionary is not going to give up without a fight, so he has all these new men, like this Tiger. I ain't bothered to learn all their names, but he got the main core new men that we'll see for the bulk of the story is like this Tiger humanoid, this crocodile humanoid. We got Bova, is the only person I remember the name, because we more often than not see her pop up here and there than any of these other new men. We got Sir Ram. That's another name because he's kind of like a de facto leader for after High Evolutionary. Sir Ram, this rat, creature. He's a little rat. He's not like a human-sized rat. And there's a mass figure named Anon. Lisa's Anon or something like that. And while they're fighting off all these, and Ursula's bear lady, and they're fighting off all these new men. On this dolphin humanoid guy, I forgot his name, but you stop seeing him after a while. I'm not sure what happened to him. So Quicksilver shows up and stops Fabian from trying to shoot at his daughter, because at this point in time it's never really established if Pietro's daughter has since he is a mutant and Crystal is an inhuman, more than likely the daughter will develop like powers, but we don't know through this story. I could probably easily look it up, but there's a period where they make a stop at the Inhumans citadel called New Adeline, and there's a ritual process they have every once in a while where they got a new batch of children that are attuned to, pretty sure it's part of like this children of other Inhumans, where they should be genetically attuned to the Terrigen mist, where they, once exposed, if you are genetically tied to an Inhuman background from ages ago, then you will go through the Terrigenesis, which will grant you Inhuman abilities. But Pietro is kind of weary of this process with his child, because she's only, and that's another issue I have with this. This is a small nitpick, but I'm not sure why the writer wrote this kid to be so, it's just like, oh, she has one layer, just be cute kid, don't add any nuance to the kid. It's like, daddy, mommy, you're here, and it's all, you see this dialogue when it comes out this little girl's mouth as all just, I'm cute kid, insert cute kid line, mommy, daddy, you're here, read me a story. And it's like, oh my god, I'm like, oh my god, you can clearly this kid can say words. You can give her some more beyond that. It's very robotic to me. It's like, very artificial, and it's like, come on, like, you don't have to make a whole thing for her, but whenever you have her speak, have her say something worthwhile. But it's unclear whether or not she's because more than likely she'll have powers, but will it be Inhuman or will it be mutant? And we don't know if it's mutant until the kid reaches the age of 13 or so, because that happens during puberty. But Terrigenesis magic can happen almost any time when a child of an Inhuman is exposed to the Terrigenesis. But I guess Pietro's preferred his child to be to grow up mutant. As a matter of fact, I want to check right now. It looks like, oh, him and Crystal like are split. Oh, that's a shame. Luna Maximoff. Um, um, yeah, she's Inhuman. Yep. It's kind of a shame because, like, She was a little kid, I guess, when she got exposed to Terrigenesis, but it didn't give a chance to at least wait until she was like 13 to see if she manifests any kind of mutant abilities. But it's a 50-50 shot. There's a 100% chance you have powers, but 50-50 shot whether it's gonna be mutant. Because even if you have like a mutant parent, it's not a guarantee that the child will be a mutant themselves, but they'll definitely carry the X gene. But Luna's powers turns out to be aura vision. Luna can see the feelings of others as colorful auras. These states are represented to her as various cascading colors that she learns to interpret and to change for various effects. Her ability to grant also grants her a number of others that she can utilize with some degree of skill. Empathy. Luna is now a full empath, able to sense, read, and manipulate the state of nearby beings, including their emotional state, intentions, truthfulness, and mental illness. Because her powers are essentially some kind of visual empathy, they are generally limited to her line of sight. With her empathic powers immersed, her blue-colored eyes turn golden. Precognition. Her vision abilities grant her a degree of sight into the future outcomes, allowing her to predict the actions and behaviors of others. She managed to evenly spar with Karnak by predicting his movements, despite him being much faster. Mind control, mental healing, telepathic immunity, Terrigen crystals connections. Weaknesses. After receiving the powers, Luna had trouble controlling them and wore shades all the time. It appears that she gained enough control of her powers to no longer require them. Looks like we've got some notes here. It was originally believed that Luna was turned into a baseline human with her mutant and inhuman genes had canceled each other out. However, with her father's mutant status revealed to be that of a mutate, the true reason why she was believed to have been born a baseline human is unknown. So it's kind of like, wow, this. But like I said, it was like a 50-50 shot, it would be a mutant or inhuman, but it's 100% guarantee that this child will be a powerful, have some kind of powers. And the Acolytes, Exodus, and Fabian view this child as an abomination because since they're mutants, as they view pure mutants, they view Luna to be an abomination because Pietro birthed a child that was half mutant and half inhuman. But Pietro was not having none of that, and somebody tried to take a pot shot at his child. And of course, Bova and the others make their way and escape because Wundagore Mountain's about to come, down. Exodus is about to seize this place, and of course, like these new men and high evolutionaries fighting violently. But they know they lack the manpower to actually efficiently fight them off. So, they make their escape. They go to this upstate New York area, this castle that, is like one of many safe houses owned by High Evolutionary. And before High Evolutionary went off to parts unknown to try to secure the isotope E, he bequeathed the responsibility of leading the new man onto Quicksilver. And so Quicksilver needed to be in charge and help run the ship while Evolutionary is gone. His priorities is like on the forefront of his child to make sure she was okay. But Saram tested him in the battle of like swordsmanship to make sure like he's battle ready and mentally like focused. But there was like some during this arc, there's like in New York there's like a crazy thunderstorm, and turns out it's more of like a more phenomenon than natural weather, where the city is getting attacked by this woman named Thundra, who Pecho remembers from the Avengers files, and she essentially is like a good person, but she's going on this manic berserker rage, as he put it, and her husband uh is his name is Adon Aklon or something like that. It starts with an A, and he's coming in kind of like he looked like Conan the Barbarian, and he's trying to trying to find his beloved, trying to save her, because he's thinking like he's kind of bullheaded, thinking like, oh, they're attacking my beloved, and he's just like fending off Pietro and other new men from who's trying to stop Thundra, who's just wreaking havoc. But in the ensuing fight, it turns out that on their home world, which is like a whole different dimension itself, there's this priest who is messing around with this machine, who's trying to essentially swap places with the Earth, with their planet, because on their realm, is about to essentially end up like Krypton with, it's about to collide with, I don't know if it's the sun or just some kind of like some weird atmospheric danger. Just to try to save themselves, they trying to swap places with Earth. But with this mess around machine, it also is not doing it 100%. It ends up transporting a few of the new men into their spot along with other random citizens, and they cause the Thundra to go crazy, drugged her up and have her go run rampant, try to distract her husband, who is only, I guess, kind of like weakness they can really exploit is his love for her, because I guess it wasn't the first time he had interactions with Earth, and he wanted to, if they try to do this, he will try to stop them. So they needed him distracted, but all doesn't work. He ends up, it never really, I guess the drug kind of ran through her system, but it never actually did anything to try to like cure her or do anything to try to get through to her. But I guess you can say the drug kind of went through her system. She came to her senses. They end up going through like a portal back into this dimension, which once again never really see this whole situation resolved, possibly in like a different tie-in. But they put a stop to this guy and his this crazy priest and his warped sense of trying to save their planet from destruction. But as the whole entire fight is over, somehow, as they're trying to send these guys back to Earth, Quicksilver got separated and ended up on New Adeline and runs into his, I guess, then wife, Crystal. And so she ends up bringing him to uh, uh, to the royal family. And of course, Quicksilver is like not enjoying himself because this royal family is just like they don't hate him, but they just kind of find him not enjoyable to be around. And I want to take a moment to bring this up. They really taken a moment to make sure that they make PHO look almost exactly like his father. With this is the jawline and the hairstyle. It's just like a very young Magneto. This is like straight up like this is like, yeah, this is definitely, you're definitely your father's son. But anyway, they all got their kind of like nose up in the air when it comes to Quicksilver. God knows why. Maybe it's the whole, friction between Inhumans and mutants. But all the while, Quicksilver is just like stewing in this like, oh God, I really do not want. And it's like he's restless. Given the fact that was somebody with super speed, of course they're restless. Compared to everybody else, it's like, imagine like waiting for a snail to get to one end of a pavement to the next end of the pavement. It's a slog for them, and you try to have to properly manage it. This goes for like the Flashes and Quicksilver and anybody with super speed. It's like they probably all got that same mindset, given how fact they have to move at a certain speed. And you see later he meets up with Scarlet Witch. She takes Lockjaw to come pick up Luna from Bova, so the daughter can spend time with both her parents. All the while, he's masked in silhouette, but it's clearly Fabian Cortez because he got that same stupid bandana on. I don't know why they waste time trying to mask him or silhouette him just to make it this whole mysterious, who is this person? But Fabian Cortez has the mutant ability to enhance people with superpowers or remove them altogether. So he ports into Maximus the Mad his cell and enhances his mental powers. Maximus is the brother of Black Bolt, who, because given like Inhuman's power, there's always some kind of trade-off with their abilities, where like like Medusa, even though her hair can do all kinds of cool things, like an extension of herself, it's too big and it's kind of like draw notice. It's not like a functional, quote unquote. And Black Bolt got a powerful voice, but he can't normally speak like he would with anybody else. He got to rely on somebody with like psychic abilities or miming or sign language, hand sign language. So I don't know exactly what drawback of Crystal is, but you catch my drift. Maximus the Mad is kind of like a brilliant scientist with, I don't know if he's like a scientist, but he's got like mental powers, but the advanced intellect causes him to be crazy. And he's always trying to usurp Black Bolt and the throne. Not too dissimilar to how Loki was back in the day. So he enhanced his abilities so that way he can try to I'm not sure how they knew. Maybe they was in some kind of, maybe the Archelites had something to do with separating Quicksilver from the rest of his new men that he's supposed to be leading, which will cause friction between him and the new men for a little bit, because they feel like they'll start to feel, slowly but surely feel like Quicksilver is abandoning his post and he's supposed to be leading them in the High Evolutionary's absence, but they feel kind of like abandoned. But they essentially, Cortez charging Maximus to kind of like distract everybody and mess with Quicksilver in the process. This is the way I'm interpreting it as I'm reading it. they never really fully explain. But Maximus focuses mental abilities to take over the mind of Quicksilver to steal one of the canisters of the Terrigen mist, because X is gonna want to need it for his machinations. But it's a funny little dinner scene where like Pietro is just like, okay, I just want to get through this, but I don't want to look like I'm trying to like rush you or anything, so I'm just gonna eat super slowly just to like just fake it. But as his mind as is wandering, and he's trying to slow down, but he's not slowing down. As he's telling himself to slow down, he's still fast, and before he realizes it, he's already done eating before everybody else was able to start digging in. And he's looking like, oh my god, did I just eat, quickly? Then I told myself I wouldn't do. And like now he's really gotta wait because everybody else haven't eaten yet. So he ends up just getting up and just waiting about. And then during the whole process, this ritual with the Terrigen mist, for this new batch of kids about to happen to, make more Inhumans, Maximus takes over Quicksilver's mind, causes him to steal one of the canisters, but he ends up getting stopped by Crystal. And then, of course, eventually he snaps out of it because the whole Maximus' powers doesn't last long. So now Quicksilver's sitting in a cell, and now he's definitely got to wait. But, which is the thing. Every time like you deal with the Inhumans, more often than not, their biggest bad guy they have to deal with is Maximus, Black Bolt's brother, who's constantly trying to take over the throne. And it's like, yeah, I get it's your brother, but it's like the umpteenth time that you got this guy trying to take over and cause harm to your people. Clearly he's mentally not all there. So despite you having him chained up and in a cell, I want to say execute, but you gotta do something. Like, I don't know, turn a vegetable, put him like a forever sleep or something, because as long as he's conscious, he's gonna be plotting something. But anyway, and it's kind of like anything that seems like to be going wrong in this city, he's obviously should be like immediately the first person that you look towards, especially with somebody acting strangely than they normally are. So of course Black Bolt, his first visit is to his brother, and this dude's such a sniveling freaking coward. Like, no, Black Bolt, please, sir, brother, please don't hurt me. And it's like, you grow some balls. And of course, yeah, I guess he got a right to be afraid, given the fact that this guy can literally whisper and turn into a skeleton. But Fabian shows up, amplifies, Fabian's powers again, so that way he can take over Black Bolt's mind and the other royal family to use as puppets, so he can just cause havoc in Adeline, and so he can like get the mist for Fabian. But Crystal breaks out Quicksilver, and along with Scarlet Witch, they try to put a stop to Maximus. But Maximus has Black Bolt Whisper die, and then this shockwave, as powerful as Scarlet Witch is, as it mentions in the issue, her powers isn't as fast as somebody will say something. My first thought, and you see like Scarlet Witch and Black Bolt together now, your first thought will immediately go to Doctor Strange 2, where she can just like, bend reality and make him don't have a mouth. But at this point in time, as the issue was going on, people were pretty, I won't say playing fast and loose with Scarlet Witch's powers, because right now we kind of nailed down that, because back then they just call it hex powers or probability powers, where like things just don't go the way you want it kind of situation. And of course she dabbles in magic back then, but now it's like full on, no, she is a magic user. She's like, you know, her mutant ability is she's attuned to is attuned to magic. She's proficient in magic more so than your average person would be. She doesn't have to work that hard to gain the skill to use magic, and as somebody like Dr. Strange had to work hard at. And it isn't just probability powers or hex powers. She just wills magic, and she can just do a lot more than just ruin somebody's day. But anyway, Quicksilver gathers her up, and of course he flings one of her spell bubbles she was casting and had it collide with the vocal frequency of Black Bolt's power, and it caused like a massive explosion. Maximus trying to team up with Fabian because his powers are starting to wear off on the royal family. He then tricked Fabian into enhancing his powers again, so that way he can control these, you know, subhuman inhumans. I don't know who they're supposed to be. Kind of like the grunts for the royal guard, the royal family, and they're swarming everybody under the command of Maximus. But Crystal, wielding the Black Knight's, you know, ebony sword, you know, they view it as, oh, she's the queen, so they bow to her, and that kind of puts an end to all that. Black Bolt stops Maximus and locks him back up, and Fabian kind of ditches the whole entire scene, failing to acquire the Terrigen Mist for Exodus. And Quicksilver is like a little confused, like, why does he have Black Knight's sword? And of course, you know, he probably gifted that to her for some reason. So we have this little flashback, you know, of the moment that Quicksilver arrived in Adeline, and Black Knight still kind of like in love with Crystal, and, you know, trying to reconcile with that, or at least try to talk with her, even though she's like not in a, you know, mood to talk. But it's kind of her fault. It's like, you know, girl, you know, you did kind of lead, I won't say lead him on, but you gave him the impression, you, even though you was on the outs with Quicksilver, you gave the impression, you know, more than likely, given a flashback, that you two were like, oh, you two could be serious together. But this probably wasn't meant to be, and you should have had this long waited talk with this guy when you two were going to get back together, go back to Black Knight, tell Dane, like, hey, you know, we had good times together, you was a very sweet man, but I'm going back to my ex because we have a daughter together and we want to work things out. Instead, you got this guy coming all this way to try to beseech his love to you or some stuff. And then of course Quicksilver ain't having none of that. But then you get the flashbacks about, you know, what led up to all this, with the whole situation with, you know, Onslaught leaving the baby under the care of Bova. He just wanted to try to get away from everything, especially at this point in time. Magneto was working with the X-Men, or at least with Xavier itself, after, you know, the whole Onslaught situation, and he's on the outs with his father at this point in time, and it's like, I don't want to be under the same roof as this guy. So he tries to run off with Wolverine and Hercules on some weird adventure that Hercules needs some help get done. But then with Wolverine's advice about not like just leaving things unsaid, and at the time feeling like, oh, your daughter needs you because she lost her mother, don't let her lose her father. So he goes back, and then he runs to Wundagore to go find his daughter to spend time with her. Then realizes, oh, Crystal's actually alive, because nobody really stayed dead in comics like that, except for maybe a few chosen few. So Black Knight shows back up, has like a sword duel with Quicksilver for the hand of, well, not necessarily the hand of Crystal, but just the right to just like, I have a right to speak with this woman because I need to get things off my chest. And like, dude doesn't get a clue that, you know, clearly she doesn't want to be with you, but love makes people do crazy things, especially over vagina. So he clearly beats Quicksilver in a sword fight because he's a lot more skilled at it than Quicksilver. Despite the minor training he got from Sir Ram practicing the sword fight. Because at this point in time now, they back in Wundagore Mountain trying to have this serious conversation with Crystal. But she, after just feeling annoyed at the fact that these two guys are fighting the way she does, where they are over her, without giving her a say on who, you know, trying to talk on her behalf rather than letting her make her own choice of what she wants to do. So she takes their daughter and goes back to Adelon, leaving Quicksilver there holding his junk. And Black Knight kind of like takes off. We'll see him one more time before the adventure ends. But then Quicksilver's sitting in the room talking with this guy, this mysterious guy in a robe, questioning who he really, like, ask yourself, picture, who are you really? Who are you? Very mysterious, asking like kind of like vague questions. And Saram burst in, ready to like chew out Quicksilver about like his lack of leadership. And then the guy in the cloak disappears. During this whole ordeal, while Quicksilver was dealing with all that, the new man that was with him dealing with the whole situation with Thundra and that crazy priest, they decided to take up the sights, go to see the opera and everything like that in New York. But then most of them were kidnapped by the acolytes and they're held prisoner. And Saram is just like kind of ticked because like most of our people has not returned and we haven't heard from them in a while. Things are not looking good. And the acolytes, most of them are mutants who wouldn't necessarily will work with Exodus, but they're working with them, like, you know, Pyro, Avalanche, Omega Red, because most of them are either dealing with or know people are dealing with the legacy virus, which is like AIDS for mutants. Back in the day, it was like a whole big thing in the early 2000s with like the whole AIDS epidemic and stuff. Well, like, you know, in the 90s into the 2000s, the whole AIDS epidemic and stuff like that was like a big thing. And of course, they've written that stuff into the comics, being like the legacy virus, which is terminally fatal for mutants. And they need to try to find, as a whole big thing, trying to find the cure for it. Matter of fact, Peter Rasputin's sister, Magic, was inflicted with the legacy virus, and that was what killed her as a little girl. But then she eventually came back as, you know, Magic, attuned with the whole demons of limbo, blah blah blah. So they figured this isotope E is essential in finding a possible cure for the legacy virus. So they're questioning each of the new men. The rat switches places with an ordinary rat, so that way he can run off to try to get help from Quicksilver and surround the others. And then, of course, the replacement rat was eaten by this cat lady. I forgot her doggone name. I've seen her in, like, one of the old X Factors or X Force original members back in the 90s. I forgot her doggone name, but eventually Exodus found where the High Evolutionary is hiding, along with the isotope E, was in a secret location in the Savage Lands. And that's where, after the rat tells Pietro and the others about the whole situation, they all eventually convene on the Savage Lands, and they end up discovering the High Evolutionary, and he's starting to devolve into his simian form, because humans evolved from apes or primates, and his powers are kind of fluctuating because of this stuff, and it caused him to, because his exposure to this isotope caused it to become kind of erratic. And you go to this story about how he got to this point where it's like he was around in WW1, where he met up with this mysterious person who gave him like the funds and resources he needed to pursue his research about evolution. And he created his first new man, which was this kind of cheetah humanoid, but ends up getting shot by hunters. So that's where he decided to take his research to a secluded area, which became Wundagore Mountain. Or no, he crap, I forgot which came first. He at some point went off world, and and that's when he probably eventually made he discovered Half World. He was the cause of a lot of those experiments, which resulted in the creation of Rocket Raccoon, if you recall from the movie or read the stories. But then eventually went back to Earth and tangled with he eventually tangled with the likes of the Hulk, Thor. Thor was looking for, because he had Jane Foster under quote unquote employ, dealing with stuff. It's hard to, it wasn't explicit on whether or not she was there of her own volition, but Thor came by, helped out dealing with some kind of problem, took Jane Foster, and that was the whole thing. And then he goes through this evolution of isotope E, starting with A, which helps him stay young forever. And then it helps with like the B seed, help with the next wave of human or new men. And then realizing after a couple of wars and attacks on his people, he decided he needs knights, which these new men kind of talk like they're in like a Shakespearean play, because and they kind of took on the whole Arthurian type of culture. It was like, huzzah, like fight honorably, and all that stuff. Not too dissimilar to how like Thor might talk, but more of Middle Ages in this case. One such new man was like like he needed like real knights, and like he needed like some like somebody who would like be soldiers in case of an possible attack. So one of the first wave of these knights was called I forgot what they called him, but we go by his kind of title, Man Beast, which is like bred from a wolf. But that was under isotope D when he was made, and isotope D was really unstable, which caused mental instability and caused like this guy to try to usurp the high evolutionary, but he was quickly put down and stopped. So eventually he got to isotope E, which was supposed to enhance certain abilities and kind of like, you know, make his experiments of evolution better with his new men. But it has its drawbacks too. As you can see, he's reverting to his simian devolution. Now, during this on-sea fight, Acolytes are fighting with the new man. Quicksilver is giving chase to Evolutionary while being chased himself by Avalanche and Pyro and eventually Anon, who turns out to be a complete traitor and kills one of the dog new men, which he blames on the Acolytes. We'll find out later who that, you know, Anon is. But the Acolytes don't get the isotope, and most of them are just like, you know, Exodus like, okay, Acolytes, you know, return to me. All you other like mutants, like you kind of like, you know, tainted mutants, because they have like legacy virus. You're no longer, you failed me way too much, so pretty much piss off. So, you know, we don't see like Pyro, Omega Red, or was a Pyro, Omega Red, and the cat lady, the you know, the recognizable people that you see from X-Men stuff. You know, this is the last time we'll see them. So it's all about the Acolytes wholeheartedly. So Pietro has met up with Wanda and Hawkeye because the Supreme Intelligence of the Kree is asking for the Avengers' help in dealing with these rogue Kree soldiers who's trying to use, because during the whole fight on New Adeline against like the Fabian and Maxima, whatever, they took a canister of Terrigen mist in the whole this rigmarole, and plan on using it with this machine to shoot a beam at, because I think they're on the moon. They shoot a beam. They plan on shooting a beam at the Earth, trying to force new Kree people. Now, of course, the Supreme Intelligence wants to put a stop to this, but he has his own agenda, which he doesn't want to divulge, which I imagine will be covered in like an Avengers story or something, because we don't really resolve it here. So they realized that they kidnapped Carol Danvers, who at the time was going by Warbird and not Captain Marvel. That's just one of her many names that she went by over the years. And she was essential in their plot into utilize, because her powers are essentially tied to Kree stuff. So they need kind of like, I guess, like a stabilizing agent, which I guess she's essential to make this plan work. And at that time, Carol, if you're not familiar, she is a recovering alcoholic, not unlike Tony Stark. And, you know, more often than not, when you know, read some stuff that she's in, every once in a while you might see her going to AA meetings, not unlike Tony Stark. so at this point in time, she hasn't really dealt with that. So Pietro, Wanda, and Hawkeye take one of the Quinjets to space to save Carol and put a stop to these Kree soldiers. Pietro saves Carol, puts her in a different room to try to, because like, you're powerful, but you're not able to fight efficiently at this state. But then she realized, oh no, I gotta help. I'm good, I can do it. I'm good. Like, because she's like barely able to stand. And so to recharge her powers, she just quickly drunk this weird solution, not even knowing what it is. It could be like cleaning solution for all you know, but she drinks this sucker like a complete idiot. Luckily, it restores her powers quickly, but she's drunk off that stuff for some reason. Don't know why that make you drunk. But then, you know, thanks to Lockjaw, you know, coming in to try to port them out, because they trying to take back this Terrigen Mist so they won't use it. Carol comes in and starts rapidly, you know, just shooting wildly, and until she eventually focused on the machine itself. During this fight, Lockjaw gets injured in the leg, but still was able to teleport all the heroes out. This pisses off Quicksilver, and there's like a thing with, you know, like in Quicksilver's narration box, how like more often than not he tends to be the hothead that needs to be reeled in, but he's in a unique position where he's like kind of like a de facto leader, and you know, many of these arcs leading up to now, and so he's had to be the one to reel in somebody else, which is kind of like a new experience for him. And he's really pissed at Carol, the fact that not only you injured Lockjaw, but the fact that you nearly caused all of our lives in the process. And like, he's tempted to let her fall, but it's like, no, I think it's better to have Captain America chastise you, because that would, having Captain America chastise you is probably like the worst feeling you'll probably ever get, more than anything else. I can imagine how that, you know, just make, oh my god, just you know, having Captain America tell you how disappointed he is in you is like, oh my god, that is horrible feeling. It's just better get punched in the face by him than just being like lectured by him. But the whole situation with dealing with those Krees and all that stuff is probably dealing with that in some kind of Avengers or Captain America tie-in kind of situation. So now it goes back to what Pietro is dealing with, heading back to Wundagore Mountain. Come to find that, you know, the acolytes are the heroes for hire, which normally is just Luke Cage and Iron Fist, but we got Scott Lang and Black Knight with them, and they're in their primate forms because of the use of the isotope. And she sees like a downed white tiger who's part of the High Evolutionaries people, who's used for a particular purpose, which we'll know in a minute, but she's wounded. So Quicksilver rushes her to this company called Oracle, being led by Jim Hammond, who was the original Human Torch, who's working alongside Jane Foster and helped nursing her back to health, while assisting the heroes for hire dealing with the acolytes. And of course, the ISO is unstable, so they're going back and forth between their primate forms and their regular forms, and they're trying to stop the acolytes. They fight the good fight, but you know, in like a different tie-in, they get ambushed and captured. And then you come to find out that Anon uh, 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 neutralized the High Evolutionary when in his weakened state. And it turns out it was Man Beast, who's not dead as previously thought, and decides to trick the other Newman, thinking like, oh, I'm in control now. Like, if you raise a hand at me, there'll be the end of the High Evolutionary. And they view the High Evolutionary as their king or god. So it's like, of course, they'll like not want him harmed. And so they all essentially, under the new rule, they all did what Man Beast said, and they end up capturing his Fire and Quicksilver, and they tied him up in a cell. And of course, Man Beast essentially is trying to work with Exodus, because he's willing to give the isotope to Exodus, because Man Beast used the isotope to devolve the Heroes for Hire, but he's willing to work with Exodus, but he just don't want himself affected while he's using this isotope. He doesn't care what happens to anybody else. He just, want to be left alone, whatever. Then Quicksilver gets visited by this mysterious man in the cloak, who reminds Quicksilver, like, who is your father? You got Magneto's blood running through your veins. I could help you release, but I'm not. You can do this yourself. And he harnessed his, inner Eric Linkcher bloodline and just break the bonds of these shackles, which I don't know, I guess it could happen. He could have just vibrated them off, but it seems like he just broke them like he got like super strength or something. This wasn't like kind of drawn in a particular way to make it clear, like he uses his super speed in order to get it done. So he races out there and gets the isotope, use it on himself to enhance his abilities. Oh, She-Hulk's there, by the way, along with White Tiger. And Thena, which you got some Eternals, at least a Eternal involved. So Bova actually has Evolutionary in her care while she's hiding out in this secret cave near the castle. And since the Numed doesn't know this, Man Beast's exploiting this so that way he can have some kind of rule until he can personally find Evolutionary to finish him off. But now that Quicksilver's releasing everybody, the fight is on. And of course, it's kind of like a weird thing with like Exodus and Exodus and Man Beast. They both like trying to cut a deal, but inside their mind, they just like figuring out ways to like trying to like, exploit this long enough until they can one up the other. But the fight is on. Everybody's trying to, stop the acolytes and try to get their hands on the isotope thing. And White Tiger is specifically, like I mentioned, she had like a specific role in all of this, the way she was created. She was specifically created to be like a contingency plan for somebody like Man Beast if there's ever like a repeat of the first time this happened. And she was there to take him out, which we don't see the end result of that here. Is like a Heroes for Hire tie-in with Quicksilver or team up book or something like that. That's not part of this run, but I imagine like she managed to put a stop to him for good, and the whole situation with the isotope is resolved in that team up book. along with how the Heroes for Hire dealt with this whole crazy situation. But thanks to Athena and Quicksilver, they managed to put the stop to Exodus. So the High Evolutionary, probably on like a different book, took his new men off Quicksilver's hands and went off their little separate ways. Quicksilver is going back to, you know, these old places, like his place where he grew up and as a kid, and back to Wonder Mountain, and this man in the role, which, you know, I've been kind of holding on to until now, is Magneto. You can see the helmet underneath the thing. The artist was pretty much done with the, you know, false pretenses. Like, we'll just like not, let's not, you know, mess around anymore. We know what it is. It's Magneto. He's alive. Well, he's never dead. He's, you know, in like a previous flashback, he's supposed to be with Xavier, but he's been like behind the scenes watching over his son, essentially. And he's been like asking him, like, hey, who are you? It's like, you know, I'm an Avenger. I'm a hero. I'm a father. And it's like, no, you're not any of those things. You aren't a hero because you haven't been, you know, leading effectively. You shirking your responsibilities as leader, has proven the fact that you wasn't around with these new men knights who were expecting you to lead them in the evolutionary's absence. You wasn't doing that. You was off dealing with your own personal stuff with Crystal. You're not even like a father because you constantly put your daughter in danger. You essentially let other people make choices for you, because you're essentially seeking out other father figures, essentially. And this is what the Quicksilver kind of is eventually come to the conclusion. You're looking for these replacement fathers because, you know, you have your own father issues. Yeah, like Captain America, High Evolutionary. You got, you know, these other people who's supposed to be doing, you know, kind of tell you what to do with yourself. And Quicksilver eventually come to a conclusion, like, you know, I'm gonna make choices for myself. And of course, now after he like took a, you know, swung a punch at this figure, and it's like, you know, and runs off like, you know, like, I don't need to explain myself to you. It's like, I can, you know, I can take, you know, like, I'm doing this for myself, blah 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 blah. And the guy gets up and it's like, well, finally, you're learning. Essentially trying to, you know, Magneto's teaching his son is like, you need to stop relying on other people to make choices for you, or stop trying to look for, you know, a father figure approval, because you don't need anybody's approval. You're your own man. Take responsibility for your life. So I kind of like this because, you know, most of the time back in the day, well, I think kind of sort of more now, but, you know, depending on the writer, but definitely back in the day, there's a lot of animosity Pietro has towards his father. And of course, you know, it's kind of like a messed up family in a way. But this is part of the few rare times where Magneto's acting like a father to his child, especially his son, because he kind of adores his daughters more so than his own son. He kind of play favoritism a bit, but this is kind of one of those few occasions where Magneto's acting like a father to his son and pretty much telling him to buck up. Don't try to, you know, don't try to search for an approval from a father figure that you never got from your own dad. You don't need anybody's approval, essentially. But, you know, doesn't want to do that face to face and tell him who he is, because he probably won't be, you know, inclined to listen. So all these little recordings he's been doing, he saved it on these kind of discs that he ends up giving to Crystal so she can understand his mindset throughout this entire adventure from start to finish. Like I said, as I read currently right now, they're not together. They're, exes at this point. They're just co-parent at the moment. So Quicksilver, with his father kind of watching from behind the scenes, runs off with a renewed understanding of who he is. And that is the story of Quicksilver. Or at least the Quicksilver story here, his own little arcs. I kind of wish, it's like, the art is fine. Like I said, it had a shaky start, but I kind of wish it's a little bit more coherent. Like, I say that now because it was created way back when, but they should have done like a better job with making like at the very least, if it's supposed to be some kind of tie-in thing, when you go back into the Quicksilver story in the next issue, you can put in like some kind of box like previously what happened. The High Evolutionary took the new man and went off to parts unknown in the previous issue of whatever tie-in or whatever, so I can have some kind of like at least some kind of connectivity, because it feels like it's like you're watching an episode of a show and like it's like you're watching an episode of Simpsons and some story with Bart, but then he crosses over with Family Guy before during this middle of this arc, and then he's you probably don't watch Family Guy, but he's coming back in the following episode of The Simpsons. We don't know what's going on and how they resolved the last thing because they happen in a different type of show, and it's kind of like I wish some kind of level of synergy here, because there's bit of blanks. I'm not a fan of that, but it's still, I got a decent story out of this. Not exactly on the same level as something like like Gambit or the Wolverine or even Emma Frost solo stories that I read that was a little bit more coherent. But it's decent. Like I said, after I'm done reading the Scarlet Witch solo story, I'll do like a tier list of all the X-Men comics that I've read so far and rank the solo ones. Then I'll go into the X-Men team stuff, and once I'm done with all the X-Men stuff, the iconic events that they did, I'll go back and start ranking all those on how I feel about those. But anyway, that was Quicksilver. One final solo one I'm gonna do, Scarlet Witch. Looking forward to that because I started, like it started like earlier this year, I think. I only read the first issue. I didn't continue on because I figured like I want to do all of this. So since I was doing all the X-Men stuff, I want to make sure that I read its entirety, because it's I think it's supposed to be only 10 issues of that because it came out earlier this year. I think it's supposed to be only 10 issues, so it should have been wrapped up. So I'm gonna get right into that, and then do a spoiler review for that. It's probably the only solo story that's actually in recent times, because a lot of these solo ones have been all over the place in terms of time and dates of their stories. 80s, 90s, early 2000s, current day. So anyway, look forward to that in the next week and some change for Scarlet Witch. I thought I was going to do this coming Thursday, but I managed to get some time to actually, read this through its entirety. So this Thursday, I'll go into X-Men Apocalypse movie. Do a spoiler review for that. And then the last X-Men movie that I'll do a review for next week will be Dark Phoenix, which I never watched because I know how bad it is, but I'm going to watch it and do a review for you guys. But that'll be all the X-Men movies. Aside from New Mutants, but I'm not watching New Mutants. But then now that I got all the X-Men TV shows, and then eventually the movie's gonna be wrapped up, my primary focus will be like the comics now. So once I'm done with Dark Phoenix, I'll be back to the regular kind of movies that I'm gonna be reviewing, which I think I might. I won't leave it a surprise. I'll leave it a surprise when I'm gonna be doing the next movie review after Dark Phoenix. But anyway, leave a comment below. Let me know what you think of Quicksilver. Is he your favorite X-Men or mutant? Do you have a favorite story of his? Which actor is your favorite who played Quicksilver? And yeah, I will see you guys later. Take care.